Hello and welcome to Through the Bible, episode 19, Matthew 21 through 24. In Matthew 21, we see what we now celebrate as Palm Sunday, where Jesus comes into town, and Matthew is continuing his prophetic proofs that Jesus is the Messiah by quoting Isaiah 62:11 and Zechariah 9:9. Your king is coming mounted on a donkey. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, then is coming from Psalm 118:25 through 26. People are beginning to recognize him as Messiah, which is ironic since this will be his last week before the crucifixion. Not quite a week. He will die on Friday. And he goes in and he overturns the tables in the temple. When he does this, he quotes Isaiah 56:7, which says, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you're making it a den of thieves." Now that last part, "you're making it a den of thieves," comes from Jeremiah 7:11. And this is interesting to see how Jesus takes scriptures from parts of the Old Testament, brings them together and blends them to bring about new truth. And that's something that we should learn to do as well, to be able to understand how the Bible ties together at different places and not just in a contiguous order. Jesus uses a cursed fig tree to demonstrate faith to his disciples. And he goes on to tell them that it's not about talk, it's about action when he does the parable of the two sons. It's not just about what you say, it's about what you do. And so often in our society today, that's true. People talk a good game, people talk about loving the Lord, but their actions don't show that. And then we see the tenant farmers. Now, this is definitely a prophecy and a parable also about himself, as he talks about how when the son comes, they kill the son. And basically what they're saying is, we will be the lords of the vineyard now because we've gotten rid of the Lord. And he was talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees who were lording over the people, who had taken God's gift upon them to be his mouthpieces, his priests, his ministers to the people, and were actually using it for their own end. And today we see that as well. We see ministers who are building their own kingdom instead of God's kingdom. And this is directly dealing with that. Matthew 22, he says, "Many are called, but few are chosen." And we see that in that parable. The first group is too busy for the king, and the king makes a pleasant appeal to them. Look at what I've prepared for you. Look at what I have. This is the discussion of the gospel. People are turning away from God. People aren't answering his call. And what's he do? He comes in a loving way and he tries to woo them. And he says, look at what I've got for you. Look at what I have for you. But they ignored him still. And they killed the messenger. Again, talking about not only the prophets, but also Jesus, that they killed the messengers. He goes in and destroys the people that had killed his servants. And then we see that he makes a general appeal to people who normally wouldn't be invited into the kingdom, and Jesus points to them as the tax collectors and the prostitutes, the undesirables, the people that people don't consider important. And he makes an appeal to them, and they come in. But there's one that, even though he's been invited in, he doesn't really appreciate the honor that he has been given by being invited into the king's presence. He doesn't change his clothes, which in the Bible is a representation of our righteousness. We're clothed in righteousness. So he doesn't change his lifestyle. He doesn't change his mannerism once he has been brought into the king's house. And so he ends up getting kicked out. He ends up going to where there's weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, and you can take that where you want to. And Jesus then goes on later and says that all of the law is summed up in two commandments: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And boy, if we could just do those two things, if we could just follow those two things, everything else would be taken care of because the rest of the law would be fulfilled. Matthew 23, we see that we should practice what we preach and to help others enter in, not be like the Pharisees that just made things hard on people. We need servant leaders. We need ministers. We need to realize that Jesus said that the greatest will be the servants of all. And then he goes on to tell the Pharisees that the tithing is good, that their tithing and giving to the poor and to the church is a good thing, or to the temple is a good thing, but they shouldn't neglect the even more important things, which is justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Those are things that we still need to focus on today and look at. Matthew 24, this is a key eschatological passage. That's eschatology is a fancy way of the study of the end times, or a word about the end times. And He talks about there being war and famine and earthquakes. He says nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Well, that nation against nation there is actually ethnicity. So it's actually one tribal group or one clan against another clan. And we certainly see that today in our culture as we see ethnic groups rising up against other ethnic groups all over the world and even here in the United States. The beginning of labor pains is how he describes all of these things that are happening. That war, that famine, the earthquakes, all of those things, the tribal influences, all of those things that are happening are the beginning of the birth pains. What's that mean? It means that it's like a woman in childbirth. And as those things get closer and closer together, we've had these things throughout history, but as they get closer and closer together, as we hear more about them, which is certainly true in the 21st century, as we hear it more on the news, we hear stuff in the news that we never would have heard about just 50 years ago because 24-hour news cycles and all the things that are happening. It's like everything just keeps accelerating and keeps intensifying. And so that birth is coming. It's coming. We don't know when. He says no man knows the hour, but we do know it's coming. And then we see that there will be persecution, there will be false prophets that come up, and because of all the lawlessness, it says the love of many will wax cold. And we're seeing that in the church today, where many are they're just tired. They don't want to be a part of the church anymore. They don't want to be a part of God's kingdom anymore. They don't want to, or they won't say that. They'll say that they're religious or that they love God, but yet they don't want to be a part of the things He's a part of. They don't want to be the things that are important to Him. Remember, Jesus spoke to Peter and said, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it." It's not about an individual relationship with God alone. It's also about our togetherness. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. It's about us coming together, and it's that symbol of the cross with His arms stretched out. He's reaching out to all of mankind and bringing them together. And then with the vertical line reaching from earth to heaven, He's connecting us with God. So we need everything together. It's not us alone. It's us and others together with God. Very, very important. He does go on to say that he who endures to the end, in other words, it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. Many people will fall away. Many people will backslide. But he who endures to the end will be saved. He said there will be such a great deception and great deceit that if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. And He's going to keep those days short to make sure that doesn't happen. So if it's going to be that powerful of a deceit, you tell me, how important is it that we connect to God and that we connect to people who can help us connect to God in the days and times we're living? If we're gifts to each other, if each of us are a member of the body of Christ, if there's a hand and a foot and a leg and a mouth and whatever it happens to be, that we're all the body of Christ, we need all of these members operating together if we're going to be healthy in the times that we live in. And then we see in verse 31 that Jesus comes and He gathers the elects together. Again, we don't know when that's going to happen, but Jesus kind of finishes out everything by saying this: "Blessed is the servant whose master finds him doing his job when he comes." I hope that when Jesus comes, He will find you doing your job. I pray that He will find me doing my job. Occupy until He comes, were His words right before He ascended into heaven. And that's it for today. Looking forward to seeing you next time here on Through the Bible. God bless.